African history. Malagasy Uprising 1947. 1. Malagasy Uprising 1947. 1. Account for the 1947-1948 Malagasy Revolt/Uprising. 2. To what extent was France/French colonial policies/colonial legacy responsible for the Malagasy Uprising of 1947? 3. How far were economic factors responsible for the 1947 uprising in Madagascar? 4. Examine the causes and effects of Malagasy Uprising of 1947. 5. Examine the factors that contributed to the outbreak of Malagasy Uprising of 1947. Causes of the revolt/uprising. The Malagasy Uprising was an island revolt organized against the French at the island in 1947. The revolt was organized by a major Merina tribe who started at Moramongo in the eastern part of Madagascar, who began by attacking the French coffee planters and their native collaborators. Among the leaders of the uprising included Jonaginian ex-serviceman Dr. Deputy Joseph Rose, senior nationalist, and Jack Ruben Njara, a popular writer and journalist. 1. The collaboration of the French in Malagasy with the racist Boer settlers in South Africa caused the rebellion. This scared the people of Madagascar. They feared the possibility of introduction of racism in their country, hence rising against the French, leading to the outbreak of the uprising. 2. Forced labor promoted by the Compulsory Labor Ordinance caused the rebellion. The Africans were forced to work on the white settler coffee plantations and public works under hostile supervision. This humiliated and dehumanized Africans, forcing them to rebel. 3. Unfair representation of the Malagasy people in the French Assembly/Parliament caused the rebellion. Malagasy had 4 million Malgache but were represented by only 3 representatives in the Assembly and 2 to the Council of the Republic. Political affairs were dominated by the French, and the voice of Africans was not heard. This caused the uprising. 4. The poor taxation policy imposed on the Malgache caused the 1947 Malagasy Uprising. The native Malgache were made to pay high taxes, yet they were largely unemployed, poor and landless. Their taxation methods were horrible, left the natives often flogged in public. This inevitably caused the rebellion. 5. Low prices for people's produce led to the struggle. As a result, the natives became very poor, and yet they had to secure manufactured goods expensively. This explains why there was high turn-up of peasants in the struggle. 6. The high levels of unemployment caused the rebellion. The youth mainly found it hard to access jobs, and yet Second World War veterans were simply loitering around towns without jobs. Hence the revolt became inevitable in 1947. 7. Poor working conditions, especially on the railway works and plantations, caused the rebellion. The French used to give Africans 15 francs for a day's work, but surely this was very little to get essentials like food, which were very expensive. This sparked off mass uprising. 8. The collaboration of the French colonialists with the former criminals like the urban unemployed. African history. Malagasy Uprising 1947. 2. 10. The role of nationalists caused the 1947 Malagasy Uprising. These included Jonagini, Dr. Deputy Joseph Rose, and Jack Ruben Njara. They formed a democratic movement for Malagasy renovation MDRM, which organized people, offered leadership, mobilized and mounted pressure on the French, hence causing the uprising. 11. The political repression imposed on the Malagasys caused the revolt. The French used harsh and brutal rules against the Africans. Africans were denied their political rights. Africans were detained without trial. The press was censored and political parties were banned. These uncalled-for policies compelled the Africans to stage an uprising against the French. 12. The economic exploitation of the Africans caused the uprising. The French established companies in Madagascar which exploited the Africans. This was followed by forced labor with meager pay. Overtaxation became the order of the day, using brutal methods of collection. These laid a foundation for the outbreak of the uprising. 13. Land alienation in Madagascar made the uprising inevitable. The increased influx of the white settlers as a result of World War II, which made the people of Madagascar to lose their land to the French. The land was used to set up plantations such as coffee plantations, which made the Africans very poor because land was a source of livelihood. Therefore, the Malagasys organized a revolt to reclaim their land. 14. The impact of World War II contributed to the outbreak of the revolt. The war destroyed the European economies, including France, and therefore there was need for economic recovery. The war also created a class of ex-servicemen who had acquired military skills, hence mounting pressure on the French in 1947. 15. The influence of the Vietnamese War of Independence of 1946-1954 led to the uprising. The Malagasys organized a revolt against the French because of the spillover effects from Vietnam. They all shared the same problems like forced labor, overtaxation, and land grabbing, hence leading to the outbreak of the revolution. 16. The formation of Democratic Movement for Malagasy Renovation and DRM led to the outbreak of the revolt. This was the main nationalist party which represented Africans in the French National Assembly. The French got angered and supported a rival party, Paidism, of the disinherited, composed of criminal Elsler and former slaves of the coast. The NDRM organized people, offered leadership, mounted pressure on the French, hence causing the uprising. 17. The exceptional role of the Marina tribe contributed to the outbreak of the revolt. This was the major tribe in Madagascar that played a key organizational role in the revolt. The tribe began by cutting the coffee plantations of the French in Moromongo, killed the French coffee planters, attacked the native collaborators using stones, sticks and spears. The actions of the tribe incited people into the uprising. 18. The secret French plan of resettling foreigners in Madagascar led to the revolt. The French were planning to resettle the Jews, people from West Indies and the Kabylians from Algeria. The Malagasys organized a revolution in order to protect their land and independence from the African history. Malagasy Uprising 1947 made it hard, if not impossible, for the Africans to compete with the French whites, hence leading to the outbreak of the revolution. 21. The influence of the Indonesian War of Independence contributed to the outbreak of the revolt. The Malagasys were inspired to open up war against the French like the Indonesia had done against the Dutch, whose independence was confirmed in 1950. 22. The impact of Atlantic Charter of 1941 laid foundation to the Malagasy Uprising. The Charter advocated for self-determination of the colonized world, hence Malagasy was inclusive. Therefore the Charter gave strong impetus/desire of the demand for African rights. 23. The contribution of the traditional chiefs in Madagascar contributed to the outbreak of the revolt. These included the Mpanjokas, who united people, mobilized them and gave them the courage to fight for their independence. 24. The declaration of Malagasy as an overseas colony of France led to the outbreak of the revolt. The French National Assembly at Paris declared Malagasy by constitution to be part of France in 1946. This made Africans to mount pressure on the French to maintain African purity. 25. The creation of separate electoral colleges by the French contributed to the revolt. These colleges compelled Africans and the French to elect leaders separately. However, these elections did not yield the expectations of the Africans, hence laid ground for the Malagasy Uprising. 26. The influence of other earlier resistance at the island led to the outbreak of the uprising. The islanders had organized wars of resistance, for example the Franco-Hoval Wars, Manalamba Rebellion, and 1904–1905 uprisings against French domination. They had been defeated, but they never gave up the spirit of self-determination, hence the Malagasy Uprising. Effects of the Malagasy Uprising 1947–1948. Positive effects. The war led to the enactment of amnesties and remissions at the island by 1957. This involved pardoning the prisoners and many were set free. The uprising prepared the Malagasys for independence following the 1958 referendum, organized by Charles de Gaulle. This allowed the emergence of President Philibert, who offered leadership to the islanders by 1960. The war attracted press sympathy, especially from the French liberals like Louis Blanc, who condemned the French stay in Africa. The revolt led to the rise of new political groups in Madagascar for the Democratic Socialist Party, PSD, which laid a foundation for political activism in Madagascar. The war made Africans on the continent to utterly criticize the French colonial policies, and this weakened the French state, and it began on the program of decolonizing Africa. The war led to the dissolution of the separate electoral colleges for the French and the Malagasys. It therefore led to the emergence of universal human suffrage, where all adults were allowed to vote. The Malagasy autonomy freedom was recognized by the French Union Assembly in Paris. And African history. Malagasy Uprising 1947. 4. The war led to the defeat of the Malagasys after 21 months of resistance against the French. The French courts were established in Madagascar to try war combatants at the island, and many Africans were arrested upon being found guilty. The war caused trauma and psychological suffering among the Malagasys, which is still present in the country today. The day 29th March 1947 is a memorable day in Madagascar because very many citizens were killed at the hands of the French. The war led to condemnation of death of the revolt leader like Raymond Njara, who was a popular writer and a journalist. The war worsened ethnic tension in Madagascar between the Marina tribe and the former slaves at the island. This explains the delayed independence for Madagascar up to 1960. Guiding questions. Examine the causes and consequences of 1947 Malagasy Uprising. Account for the defeat of the Malagasy Uprising. Reasons for the defeat of the Malagasy Uprising. 1. Ethnic antagonisms to weaken the rebels stirred up by the French administration, leading the defeat of the Malagasy Uprising. 2. The death of Manpart. The French admitted to have killed 11,000 people, but the NDRM claimed the French killed 80,000 people, which led to the defeat of the Malagasy Uprising. 3. The Malagasy Uprising was not planned, uncoordinated and unorganized, thus leading to its defeat in 1947. 4. The military strength of French settlers. The French were militarily strong with powerful weapons. This led to the defeat of the Malagasys, who were using spears, sticks and stones to attack and kill French coffee planters and administrators. 5. Creation of a rival party by the French. For instance, the disinherited Madagascar, sponsored by the French administration, led to disunity, hence its defeat. 6. The imprisonment of the 3 nationalist deputies, who included Zach, Raymond and Jara. These were condemned to death, but instead imprisoned for some time in France. This led to disunity among the people, hence the defeat. 7. Massive arrest of nationalist leaders. Antananarivo. The French organized against a trial, charging 77 officials of MDRM, and this demoralized the Malagasys, hence leading to defeat. 8. Foreign support. For instance, white settlers from West Indies, Algerians, Kabylian, Jewish, who gave both military and financial support to the French, hence led to the defeat of the Malagasys. 9. The capture of the impenetrable forest in the eastern part of the country led to the defeat of the Malagasys. 10. The disunity among the tribes in Madagascar. The Marina tribe was the one that participated most in the uprising of 1947, hence leading to its defeat. 11. The economic weakness of Madagascar led to its defeat. This was seen when there was